but low in methionine. So the other ones that are low in lysine but high in methionine, if you eat them together, you get all the essential amino acids that you need. And as you'll see there, legumes and grains are great to go together, and those are called complemented. Not complement like, oh, you look lovely this morning, which is nice, but complement as in complete. Now, having said that, there's still good evidence that if you don't eat your legume and your grain in the same meal, you will still be able to, your body will still be able to utilize all those amino acids and produce new ones. So you don't have to micromanage or fret about, did I get my methionine and my lysine in the same food? Really, this talk is about food and not about amino acids, but put delicious things on the plate. And here are some more examples of those delicious things. Here are some sources of protein. And you see broccoli. Well, it's not high in protein, but it contributes to protein, and grains and tofu and beans and seeds and nuts and peanut butter. Even potatoes have protein. Not a ton, but when you have them together, you end up with enough protein to support your everyday requirements. And those requirements are for rebuilding muscle, creating enzymes, creating the cells that are the immune system, and so on. So that's the first macronutrient, protein. Second macronutrient that throughout life we all need are carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are, that's a delightfully big word that I always have to stop and think how to spell. And the carbohydrates are basically sugars that are single or simple, or sugars which are in a long polymer, and those would be complex. In dietetics these days, we don't say simple and complex anymore, because there's some assumptions that simple sugars are somehow harmful and complex sugars are always benign and wonderful. And it turns out some complex sugars or starches can be problematic for some people. So we simply say total carbohydrate. And nowadays we might use phrases like refined or unrefined. And of course, unrefined is better. That means that everything that was there in the beginning is still there when it gets to your plate. So here are some wonderful examples of carbohydrates: potatoes, beans, anything made out of a grain like corn or rice or oats or barley or rye. So those cereals there, breads. Although we might say that most of the carbohydrates that are our favorites are the things that are probably more refined, like soft drinks and candy and pastries. This isn't bashing those. It's really saying that these are the ones that are a thing of beauty, and more often on your plate, the better. A little extra note about potatoes, because they kind of get, they're the most frequently reported vegetable consumed by humans. If you ask any, let's say the Nutrition and Health Examination Survey poses a 3-day recall to 10,000 people once a year. As you look over the answers, the most frequently reported vegetable eaten is potato. Although potato has doesn't get good press, here's a little bit of history about potato. We should love our potatoes. So they have their roots, and that's probably a wonderful pun, in the windswept Andes Mountains of South America. And as I'm quoting from another source, it's an austere region with fluctuating temperatures and poor soil. So that potato said, I'm a hardy dude. I'm going to grow and nourish people as long as possible. So the tough and durable potato evolved in this thin air of elevations, up to 15,000 feet. And the tough pre-Columbian farmers first discovered and cultivated potato at least some 7,000 years ago. And the Incas grew them and also worshiped them. They even buried potatoes with their dead, and they stashed potatoes in concealed bins for use in case of war or famine. They dried them, they carried them on long journeys to eat along the way, dried or soaked and stewed. So, potatoes get a lot of kudos here. They are different colors, as you can see here. And, oops, there's one more slide. They call the potatoes papas, as they do today. And following, I'm not sure where I got this, because I found this a couple of years ago and I have to go back and get the source. The translation sounds as though it really was pulled from a relatively modern liturgy, but there seems to be a history of a prayer about potatoes. O Creator, thou who givest life to all things and hast made men people, that they may live and multiply. Multiply also the fruits of the earth, the potatoes and other food that thou hast made, that people may not suffer from hunger and misery. So, kudos to that potato. All right, another macronutrient that we all need every day is fat. We often think of fats as fattening, or fats can make your cholesterol go in the wrong direction, or something usually not altogether flattering, but you have to have fat. We must have fat every day, including the ones called omega-3 fats. What do the fats do? They provide energy. They help with the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. And while we know that there's fat, visible fat on the sides and under the skin of poultry and beef and pork, we can get lots of fats and healthy fats from plants. So some examples that are shown here are there's fat in chia seeds, there's fat in edamame in the form of soy, there's fat in flaxseed. There's a modest amount of fat in vegetables, and some of that fat is omega-3. There's also quite a bit of fat, of course, in coconut. There's usually no surprise to anyone, and avocado. So we need our fats and we need our omega-3 fats, and these are generously provided from plant sources. Oops, there we go. So the plant-based means, because I mentioned initially the macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And by the way, the micronutrients, which include all the vitamins, all the minerals, those are important too, but they're another hour, at least an hour all to themselves. So we covered the macronutrients up front. And plant-based means we're including leaves, pods, roots, stems, flowers, seeds, stalks, the fleshy part. So it's everything that is edible on the plant. These are the things that the gatherers pull together. And the goal is to make at least 3/4 of your plate as plant foods. Now, on this picture here, it's from myplate.gov. And it doesn't say that there has to be an animal food in that protein section. That protein section could be tofu, it could be edamame, it could be beans in complementing the grains that are above it, so rice and beans. Dairy, in this case, does not have to be cow's milk. It can be calcium fortified soy milk. So the takeaway is that the animal foods, such as eggs and milk and yogurt, chicken, beef, pork, are still welcome to the plate, but at least 3/4 of the space on your plate can be delicious, wonderfully roasted, stewed, steamed, stir-fried, pickled plant foods. So when I say about plants, again, survival, it seems as though we as humans, our survival has relied on plants. And if we compare our bodies to animals that are predominantly meat eaters or carnivores, our intestines are longer. That means that there's more space, more surface area, and more time for the breakdown and absorption of different nutrients other than just the eating of flesh. Our stomachs are less acid. One of the explanations for that is that, let's say a dog or a wild cat, a wild bear, as opposed to a tame bear, do those two words even go together? That they are eating mainly animal foods, not exclusively, but mainly, and they need a higher acid level to break down the proteins in the animal foods, whereas we're eating plants, and therefore our stomach does not have to be as acidic. Our teeth are a little designed differently from those of carnivores, in that they're not necessarily for ripping and tearing. That sounds weird. But really for crushing, like crushing seeds and crushing stalks. Not totally flattering, but gets us to the next generation. And our recent ancestors, our ancient ancestors, were primarily plant eaters, and our recent ancestors are also primarily plant eaters, such as the best plant combo out there that I can see eating morning, midday, evening, rice and beans. And I put in all these pictures and I said, I have to remember who's who on here. So I know I have at the upper right-hand corner, Cristianos y Moros, which is, I have a slide about that. We have sort of Mexican beans and rice. We have the New Orleans beans and rice. We have Boston brown baked beans and brown bread, black-eyed peas, which are then served with cornbread. If I stepped out of the territories of the US, let's say we went to an Indian style eating, we would have chickpeas with a fried naan. There are so many more combinations that I just kind of kept it down to these 6 as ways to say, when we say that our recent ancestors are predominantly plant eaters, and recent means, 20 years ago, we can still continue to eat the same way. Now, just a little bit more on that, the black beans and rice, or the Cristianos y Moros. Celebrated in Spain as a mock battle depicting the 8th century invasion by Spain by dark-skinned Moors, hence the black beans. And now you'll see the black beans and rice in many Latin cultures. And sometimes it's not explained as Cristianos y Moros, but just Moros. And it's a nickname, but that seems to be the origin of that combination. So again, our recent ancestors have relied on plant-based foods such as soups. And I have Italian bean soup. And remember, soups are great ways to have a lot of different ingredients with a lot of different nutritional profiles in a very appealing and comforting way. So here we have some leafy green, could be spinach, could be kale, could be a softer form of cabbage, along with white beans, and then adding any tomatoes or other vegetables. We have a Hungarian bean stew. I listed a few more down here so I could not forget them myself. Lentil soup, of course. And one that I prepared on a cooking demo in October, which was the combination of lima beans and corn called succotash. And then that can become a soup or a stew with the addition of tomato, more okra, any other broth. And if you feel like you gotta have it, then throw in some shrimp or chicken or tofu. So soups as a plant-based food item that is something of our recent ancestors is something we can always remember that we've been eating all along and keep eating more of. And of course, sandwiches and dips, finger foods, fun food, something where you're expected to get a little bit messy. Falafel is gotta be a favorite. Egyptian food, which is made with fava beans. I think most of the things we call street food in many parts of the world are plant-based. Not exclusively. There are some interesting things on chicken and other exotic things to eat. But hummus, which could be a sandwich spread as well as a dip, dumplings and edamame, which I have at the lower left corner of the picture. In the Chinese culture, there is a black bean paste and a red bean paste, which are sweet, but they still are good sources of the nutrients that are in beans. And they are ways to see that your profile of the needed amino acids, as well as the total carbohydrate and the fat, are met by having inventive and innovative ways to put together all these different plant-based ingredients. And who's going to say, I never had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? That's like a staple. I don't know why that's not the national food, but when I'm president, that's on my campaign. Okay, so sandwiches and dips. And of course, the spices, the sides, the herbs, all the things we call relish, all the things we call crudité. And these are not necessarily things that are unique to the Western Hemisphere. So many of our pickled and dried and salted, or even fresh and raw things come from the blend of cultures and food cuisines that have come to this continent, as well as borrowing from the indigenous people who are here. The crudité means that it's something raw. It's obviously, it seems to be a French word, although I have not put in the accent, which the Microsoft Word and PowerPoint seem to be annoyed by. I'll get over it. Okay. Now, this is a source of references on some of the things that I put together, but I wanted to come back and say, as we are looking at how we as modern people are still relying on plant-based foods, I wanted to share with you, I'm going to go to the first slide here, some images from a book that was published in 2005 called The Hungry Planet. And The Hungry Planet was written by, okay, let's do a bigger image. There we go. If you need for me to make it a little bit larger, I'll be happy to. And I'm at the 17th slide, but we can go backwards. That's no problem.
There's no picture.
I don't see anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Here's what I'm going to do then is close my.
Now we see throughout the Hungry Planet the same slide.
Right. Okay. That's going to be a little tricky.
If you go to slideshow, it might look bigger. I don't know.
I'm going
No, it's a good
to
size.
minimize this one and bring the other one up. Oh, I don't mean to stop sharing. Did I stop myself from sharing?
Yes, you did.
I'm good at this.
All right.
Okay. There we go. Hold on. How about now?
Yep. There you go.
You can see the Hungry Planet. Okay. So now that I'm talking about it, I might as well go to the first slide. So this is an author who published, he went around the world, 2005, and took a picture of different people, different families, and what they would eat for a week. He estimated the cost, and he asked them what were your favorite foods. And what we'll see is that for the most part, we all eat what is in our environment. And more often than not, our environment includes mostly plants. And if meat is a luxury, it's added. And we can also see infrastructure, what made it possible for meats to be shipped or things to be canned or dehydrated or pickled. So here's a family, and here's what they ate for a week. Once again, you see a very rich representation of plant foods. I'm not sure I see other than what looks like maybe a bottle of milk, and this is probably rice. And for all the claims of rice is fattening or rice is too not good for you, it's really about the proportion of what plants we choose. Okay. Here's a family with a far less abundant set of plant foods, and this is what is reported that they had in 1 week. There's probably the infrastructure here, one could say with some amount of certainty, is not supporting a market that would allow for affordable and generous amounts of animal foods. And so the plant foods, while some might be imported, might also be grown locally. Here's a family in China. Here's, once again, plant foods dominate the picture, and where there are animal foods, they are processed, and that you're seeing a availability of supermarkets and therefore an industry of being able to put animal foods in larger quantities on the plate at more affordable prices. Also the industry that allows for canning and bottling. But the stuff that stands out the most are the plants. Okay, Ecuador. Here are a family with a lot of plant foods, lots of plantain, lots of beans, lots of stalks and stems and leaves and roots and pods. And I am not making any sort of assessment of the choice or the cuisine, but simply we rely on plant foods and they are sustaining us. Here's a family in Egypt. This guy doesn't look happy, but well, maybe he's not about everybody coming in and taking a picture at his family table. So what do we see there? Ton of plants, breads, fruits, vegetables. These things change as people get access to more money and more access to the infrastructure that allows for the introduction of soft drinks and the introduction of preserved and refined foods. Okay. Here's a family from Germany. Now there's quite a departure here from the plants. They're way over on the side, kind of, not missing, but certainly not as represented in the same proportion as some of the others. Draw your conclusions. Here's a family from Great Britain. Once again, a lot more packaged foods. This is probably far more obvious for urban dwellers and far less in the way of plant foods. Here's a family from Guatemala. Lots of plant foods again. God bless those potatoes and onions, yeah? And it's not the absence of animal foods, but simply the proportion, at least 75% are plants. I would happily pull up a chair to that table any day of the week. Here's a family from Italy. Well, this supports a stereotype, the bread. I would pull up a chair to their table too if invited. Here's another, Japan. Now this was 2005, and while some of the information at the bottom, you may not have had an opportunity to read the details, I'm sure the prices have gone up, but I suspect the proportion of foods is roughly the same. Curiously also, most of the animal-based products seem to be fish, with a less so of land-based animals. Once again, reflecting the foods available in the setting of the home and the community. I don't know what they're watching on TV, but that guy looks pretty stern. I may need to go find something silly. A family in Kuwait. And lots of plant-based foods, again, more packaged foods, also reflecting infrastructure, the market system and so on, but still quite a bit. And reflecting more probably the religious beliefs of the family. There's lamb, and you won't find probably hot dogs or pork-based salami on this one. But still, lots of plants. Okay, Mexico. Is anyone else saying, oh my God, look at all that soda in the back? There's so much research, and I think Mexico City has had a significant impact on childhood obesity and childhood diabetes by doing a soda tax. No matter, I'm a big supporter of soda tax, as long as the tax is being used for nutrition education. Okay, but look at all the plants. Yes. Here's a family from Mongolia, plants. Now, my hunch is that this is also a freshly caught animal product. I don't know what critter it would be, but this once again represents the ecology of the cuisine that these foods have been evolved from, as well as bread. Here's a cabbage and so on. We just got 3 more. Here is family from Poland, and I think she's loving her puppy. I hope that's a puppy. And again, lots of plant foods. I would love to know if this were done 10 years later, if the proportion of plant foods is also declining in each family as, once again, infrastructure goes on. And the last 2 are from the US. I'm not totally proud of this one. The plant foods look kind of scarce. Anybody notice that besides me? And I'm not counting wavy potato chips as a plant food. A potato, maybe so. Okay. And so we're looking at again, a certain economy, a certain cuisine that is reflecting probably a large influence of advertising as well as availability and lifestyle. Burger King and McDonald's. Everybody gets some love in this picture, huh? Okay. And the last one is a family in California. Once again, the plant foods are there, but I mean, they even had to spread them out to make them look a little more obvious. But the variety of foods in the diet seem to have, again, a little more representation of commercial and processed and refined. And I think there's an artful representation here of these cups in a row. I might have mentioned this at an earlier presentation that at the time the 7-Eleven came out with the Big Gulp, which is a 32-ounce single serving, no such cup existed. They actually had to have them custom made. And now a 32-ounce single serving cup is pretty much everywhere. Kind of scary. Okay, may I then take a moment to minimize this one and open the other one? Oh, I think I closed it. So this would be a good time. I'm going to go back to my initial, the slide that was the cover slide for my presentation here, and take any questions or any comments, or if you want to review anything. Once again, my takeaway is the landscape of plant-based is that it is the foundational way that we've been eating, and we've strayed away as our incomes got better, as our communities' food availability changed slightly based on the agribusiness, based on the availability, the transportation. But we need to see that our communities still have all those very wonderful plant foods, and we can still reach back a generation or two to some of the best recipes ever that were plant-based. And at that, let me stop and see if there are any questions. Barbara, will you be the...
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if anybody doesn't want to speak out, you can either unmute yourself just to ask the question or put it in the chat and I'll read it out for Maudene.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I actually have two questions. I have one, you mentioned soy milk, but you didn't address at all these mock milks, almond milk and coconut milk, and I don't know, what do you think of those? That's one question. I'll let you answer that one and then I'll ask you the second one.
Don't let me start saying cruel things about millennials, because that isn't very professional. But here's the deal. If you have any adverse reaction to drinking cow's milk, whether it's lactose intolerance or just a milk sensitivity, I know many people who get skin reactions, then there's no reason for a human being to drink the milk of a cow. But if it doesn't bother you, I think it's a pretty nutrient dense and healthy food. So soy milk has been available for centuries. So that is another alternative to drinking the milk of a cow. It's probably more affordable in other parts of the world, but the purpose of my comment on it earlier was that according to the dietary guidelines for the United States that are until the year 2025, in other words, revised for 2020 to 25, they have 5-year intervals. As long as it is a calcium fortified source, because that's the nutritional contribution of cow's milk that is kind of unique to it. And then people say, well, I like the taste of oat milk, and I like the taste of almond milk, and I like the taste of cashew milk. And so there are options. I don't think they have a super duper nutritional profile other than saying, if I want something sort of creamy and milky, but I don't want to get sick or get rashes or get horrible acne or even mild acne. So there are options, but they're not necessarily nutritional superstars.
Okay, that's fair. The second question I had was on one of your earlier slides where you were comparing pairings of nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
There was an indication that it said, but not quinoa, in that.
Let me think where that one might have been.
It was like the second or third slide, I think. After that one, I think.
After
it was,
potatoes?
No, it was before
Okay.
potatoes.
Okay. Here, yes, okay. Good. Oh, good pickup. Yeah. Okay. High
Because
five.
I eat quinoa and I was wondering about that.
Okay. So the word grain botanically refers to a class of plants that are grass. That's if they're cousins. And quinoa is not technically a grass. It's not the Gramineaceae family. It's the family of I think it's similar to the spinach family. So it doesn't have the same nutritional profile as wheat or corn or rice or barley or oats. So the quinoa is noted that it doesn't have the same amino acid profile as the other grains do. It doesn't make it inferior, it just is different.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for picking up on that. That's a good point. I probably should have offered that. Also, the soy has unusually, unlike all the other legumes, it actually has all the essential amino acids in it. It's like some kind of gift. You know, it's like, yeah, I don't have to be supported with another food to get in my methionine. I got it already. Okay.
So I have a question here. What is the difference, especially in carbs, between white and brown rice?
So the carb difference is modest in that I'm going to wing it for a second. I probably could open a document and show the difference, but I don't want to take the time to search and all that. A third of a cup of rice, white or brown, is about 15 grams of carbohydrate. The difference is the fiber content, and the fiber content in white rice is less than 1 gram, and the fiber content in brown rice is about 1.5 to 2 for that 1/3 cup. Now, so the total carb is almost the same, and the fiber is slightly better. But I think almost and slightly make it where I would my option would be for brown rice all the time instead of white rice. Now, if you don't like brown rice or you find cooking it is kind of a trick, it is. It's a magic trick for me. Then enjoy the rice that you're used to, and you can get your fiber from other foods.
So, quick question to follow that: Can you freeze brown rice?
As a uncooked grain, yes. After you've cooked it, yes. So both ways.
Okay.
In fact, sometimes it's recommended that whole grain, meaning that the germ and the bran are still intact, that the whole grain be kept cold so that the small amount of fat that's in the germ will not go rancid at room temperature in most homes.
Okay.
So that would be if you have whole wheat flour or if you have brown rice. I took out some brown rice at Thanksgiving that I thought I would use for a rice and beans that I was cooking. And when I sniffed it, I said, ooh, I think I should have had this in the refrigerator. I cooked it anyway. Once you get lots of garlic and onion in there, it was okay. It was my secret.
So it's I just want to make sure, do you have much more of the slide, because I have a few more questions here?
No, that's it. More
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to, because I'm trying to get these in order. Women entered the workforce, families required quick preparation. Does that explain our American diet?
Oh, that's such a great question. I feel like I'm not really good at that answer because it's all the different dynamics of food industry creates a demand and then creates a product. Yes, the consumer wanted something after World War II. There were a lot of innovations in food preparation, food processing. Dehydration was kind of mastered. There was the development of the microwave as an early device, appliance. So once you had all these extra toys and you had all these extra systems of food prep, and then you could advertise them as, why spend so much more time cooking when these are shortcuts? It's kind of hard to pull apart what was the demand and what was the response. But yes, it was partly more homes had working parents with less time to cook. And I've seen a couple of statistics on how many hours a week people devote to cooking. And I can remember one of them said 30 minutes. And I thought that can't be correct. I must have read it wrong. So we're looking at how to do all of this with as little demand, but as much pleasure as possible. Time demand, that is.
Just have comment in reference to time. When years and years ago, when cake mixes first came out, the manufacturers said, well, women are going to want to bake, but they don't have time. And so, because they were back in the workforce and so forth. And so what they did was they put everything into the box, even dehydrated eggs, so that only, I think, water had to be added, and you put it in the oven and you pop up with a beautiful cake. And so there was a big backlash at that time. Women did not want everything in it. They actually had to remove the eggs. I think they had to remove the dehydrated milk. Everything was so that women should feel like they are doing something towards that cake. So I thought that was interesting. It was that from going to scratch to going to too much and then coming somewhere in the middle, so that people should feel that they're contributing to the meal in a more constructive way.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. I mean, Pete, today you can, I'm always amazed that there's something called frozen waffles. Frozen scrambled eggs. I mean, really? But, and as I said, the dehydration process was sort of defense research money during World War II in order to provide food to the military. And then it became something that private industry could expand on. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but that really kind of is at the bottom of it. Yeah, so that's interesting. I want to cook, but I don't want to look like, like I only have 4 thumbs and nothing else. And they're not opposable, so don't make it too simple. Yeah.
It's interesting. I want to comment, hungry planet, so fascinating. Those living closer to the ground, eating better than the rest of us. Can you speak on eating tahini and avocado? I'm always concerned, Ari, the fat content. Also, what is the best grain to eat? I saw on one slide amino acids. There was a quinoa exception. So we already obviously spoke about the quinoa, but about the fats and tahini and other things.
So the best grain or the best fats, I'm trying to remember as you posed the question. So the people eating closer to the land were eating better. I mean, I wouldn't say that if I were not just photographing a family's 1 week of food, that I was not able to get blood tests and do some interviews and find out that maybe they did have some nutritional imbalances. My emphasis was on the presence of plants, but there's many communities in the world that are still living close to the land and not healthy. That's socio-political stuff, and I'd love to kick that around another time. So what is the tahini and the avocado fats are mostly monounsaturated and are considered very body friendly. What time should I be there?
Yeah. All right. I think that's everything. We have more time for other. Well, I think somebody mentioned something about I ordered steamed veggies from restaurant, but comes with too much rice cooked. I heard it gets toxic. Leftover rice gets toxic.
Oh. Well, no, sure. There is like if you just went into the food poisoning section of the library, you'll never eat again. But there are some well-known fungi or molds that can grow on rice, which is left out. But if it's left in your refrigerator, it's just going to acquire the same mold every other food that sits in your refrigerator too long and gets green and slimy. The minute you see anything looking like deterioration, pitch it. Yeah, in your compost, but not in your mouth. But I don't think I have any information to say that leftover rice is going to be toxic within like the next day or two.
I have a question concerning that. I had heard years ago, probably incorrectly, you'll tell me, that if you cook the chicken with the rice, the same hot, then that's the part that's going to possibly infect the rice. Maybe it has to do with refrigeration more than the cooking.
So I'm going to go backwards on that one. What the Food and Drug Administration recommends is that no food be left after cooking for more than 2 hours at room temperature. So that means if you made like a nice lunch or dinner and you finished it at 4 and you didn't finish eating it by 6, you should pop it in the fridge. And if it's really big, separate things into smaller containers so that when they get into the refrigerator, they will cool off faster than something that is very large and where the middle of it will take longer for the cold to penetrate. Now, if you cook rice with chicken and you cook it to the point where the chicken is well done, you've hit a temperature that should have killed everything that was potentially harmful. And we think mostly with poultry, we think of salmonella, not exclusively, but salmonella. And there's many varieties of salmonella, so I can't remember which ones it would be. So therefore, if I had arroz con pollo or any other, and I probably should be able to name 10 more, but I can't, rice chicken combos, then once again, if you've got it up to the point where you see it's boiling, chicken should always be cooked to at least 100 and, I'm going to wing it here, 80 degrees.
I think it's
65 or so. Yeah, between the beef and the chicken, there's like a 15-degree difference, but no pink. That's once the pink is gone, and give it a few more minutes past pink. The pink is not saying that the meat is necessarily well done or the absence of pink. The pink is a color that changes with heat, but as long as it's gone beyond the pink for a few more minutes, you probably have killed off everything and reached the goal temperature. And in that case, I don't see why rice in there would have been a problem. That's my educated guess. If I find out that there's yet something more to be said, I will share it with Margie and Barbara and make sure everyone gets it later.
Hello. Clarice Robinson speaking. I have a couple of questions having to do with oil. The first one is the best oils for sauteing, because I've sauteed veggies and peppers or whatever in olive oil. I've done it in butter. I've done it for a short time in ghee, which is a form of butter. And I'm not sure now of what's the best oil for sauteing. That's the first part. The second part also has to do with oil, because over my lifetime, which is now 98,
Wow.
I have been taking a
High five.
I've been taking a supplement which my mother gave me as a child, which used to be called Scott's Emulsion. Now it has a Spanish name, Emulsión de Escocia. And it has helped me so much in the past, but it's cod liver oil, and that's an animal, that's a fish. So I'm just wondering about those two things. The best.
So cod liver oil is one of the things that probably was mother wit. That was one of the best things that we ever did, and should have kept doing, because we now know that the omega-3 fats have very important roles, and cod liver oil is a good source of omega-3. As long as once again it isn't rancid. But I'm hearing an echo. Is that okay? So the other question was, am I just me hearing this?
Yep. No, it's there's something. If you are not muted, can everybody please kill themselves? Oh, here we go. Thank you.
Okay. So the earlier part of the question was, what's the best fat to saute with? And I'm going to beg your forgiveness that I'm going to opt out. I know that in the culinary world, there are fats that have a higher smoking point, which means you can turn them up to a higher heat and they don't smoke. Peanut oil is one of the ones recommended for, like, if you're going to fry a turkey. I know this is a plant-based talk, but we're talking smoking point. And olive oil is not recommended for high temperatures. And it said that canola oil, if it goes very high, will taste fishy. And I would love to probably produce or even borrow some from Google, a chart that gives the best oils for temperature variations. In my home, I use olive oil and canola oil kind of only, and I just don't deep fry. And if I saute, like, some broccoli and garlic, I just go ahead and use the olive oil, and it's not heating for longer than about 7 or 8 minutes. So that's not the best answer for you. And I would be happy if it would be okay with Barbara and Margie to produce a more thorough answer and make it available as something that they can put on the website.
One of the things that I had heard about olive oil is that if you want to be able to increase the temperature a little, combine it in the pan with another oil so that you're using mostly olive, which is better for you.
Mhm.
And you're changing the smoking temperature so that it's better for the cooking.
Mhm.
And for the
And
smoke
flavor.
alarm. And smoke alarm too.
I saw something else in the chat. I have to take a peek myself and see if I could. For oil, I started using an air fryer. Oh yeah, Anita, I don't own one, but I've heard fascinating things about them.
So, also we have here from Nancy Stern, yesterday it was mentioned to use different vinegars. I don't know if I don't know what she was, but go ahead.
For just increasing the taste profile or improving the taste profile?
Red
Or-
wine vinegar, Nancy, do you want to just sort of, are you talking about how to flavor food or nutritional value?
No, to saute vegetables or onions. We talked about using white balsamic vinegar, which adds like a sweetness to whatever you're sauteing, or an apple cider vinegar. I tried not to use any oil anymore, and I'm also trying to cut down on my drinking. So I stopped using wine that I had in the house, or maybe I should say to encourage my drinking, I'm only drinking it, not cooking with it. But I use red wine vinegar, apple cider vinegar, and after yesterday hearing the chef, I'm going to try the white balsamic vinegar, because if I make like cabbage and beets and Vidalia onion, that sounds like it would be delicious if I added a sweeter vinegar to it than red wine vinegar.
That vinegars, like olive oils and like sauteing fats, are well understood in the culinary world, and I'm just a little bit on the edge of that. So I grew up getting Ann Page vinegar. You guys know Ann Page, right? It was the A&P house brand. And I haven't gotten ambitious and started trying different kinds of vinegars. And I know the world of vinegar is fascinating and will be tasty. I just need somebody to take my hand and guide me through it and see if it's really, to cut my teeth on it, so to speak. So I would say if you've tried them and you can tell the difference and you find one is more flavorful. I saw that someone did mention something about the sugar in the vinegar. If you're using something like a rice wine vinegar, or you're making sushi rice, everything calls for a little bit of sugar, not necessarily to ruin our health, but it makes the taste experience a little different. The combination of sweet plus salty plus sour is different from salty and sour without sweet. It doesn't mean you'll hate it. It just means it's the experience of the flavor is a little bit different. And we are about making sure that everyone feels like this was really a good meal and I'm so glad I ate it, as opposed to, nah, it'll do. Keep it, go for the gusto. It's one meal.
Right.
And when I get to be 98, knock on wood, I will have eaten over 80,000 meals. It's okay to eat a little sugar in that little bit of vinegar in that one food.
So,
Does anyone here make coleslaw? Do you put a little sugar in your coleslaw?
nope.
Just curious.
No,
I actually put red apple cider vinegar in mine.
Oh, so
So do-
that's the mellow factor. Okay.
Oh,
I have one, I don't know if anybody else has a question. We're a little past 2:00, so we have one last question in the memo. And then we'll have to go. I do not hear good things about canola oil, a manufactured oil. What really is canola?
So canola is a plant whose botanical family is the same as broccoli and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, collards. Of course, because I want to say the name of the family.
Cruciferous.
Cruciferous, right. And thank you. And the cruciferous has to do with the word crucifer or cross, because when the plant gets mature enough to form a flower, the flower is 4 petals in the shape of a cross. So that's essentially the origin of the name of the cruciferous family. So the plant in the English language anyway is called rapeseed. I have no idea how that name got there. It's not a friendly name. And the rapeseed oil has been on the international market for a long time. I mean, it's a very cold, hardy plant. So it's grown a lot in Canada and the northern parts of the US. But Canada was the main producer, I understand from some earlier reports. Then once corn oil and soybean oil were on the throne as the king and queen, in part because of United States subsidies of the corn and soy industry, the use of rapeseed oil was declining, and that means it has an impact on the international trade for different nations. The same way palm oil and coconut oil was not enjoying popularity because soybean and corn oil was, the head of the pack. So one of the downsides of rapeseed oil, other than the name, is that it contained a fatty acid that was associated with cancer. And I'm a little cloudy right now as to what it was and how it was identified. So would need to have a refining stage put in there. So you get your seeds, you crush them, you get the oil goes to the refiner, it takes out the erucic acid, and now the oil is ready for the international trade. And if the Canadian Oil Research Association created a succession of generations of rapeseed seeds that gradually had less and less and less erucic acid in it, so that they came up with a seed which, when you crushed it and created an oil, this fatty acid associated with cancer was no longer detected. And because it was done by the Canadian Oil Research Association, it was CAN Oil OLA, canola. So canola is essentially rapeseed that has been selectively bred. I'm not going to say genetically modified, because it's the same way if you wanted to come up with a rose with a pink base and white frills. You just selectively breed your plant to come up with these new features. So selectively bred rapeseed plant to have no erucic acid. Now, I'm not sure what the politics are, because the politics are always there around food. The politics against sucralose or Splenda on the market was vicious from the aspartame or the equal people. I mean, billions of dollars spent to bash this competitive artificial sweetener. That's another story. So there's always a question you have to have as to why there are unqualified stories about dangers of something which is competing with something else. And that's not a naive attitude. It's just an uninformed, not completely informed, which means that there's some truth to it, and yet I'm not sure of the total truth. But I keep canola oil in my refrigerator. It is low in saturated fat. It is high in monounsaturated fat, which makes it a very similar profile to olive oil. No, it doesn't have 6,000 years of human history the way olive oil does. At least 6,000. There's evidence of olive oil shipping and pricing found in shards of broken canisters in some of the remains around the building of pyramids. So we know olive oil goes way back, But the danger of canola oil, I have never seen anything which demonstratively is good science. So I'm okay with it. Now, the flip side is corn oil and soybean oil, which are consumed by the gallons daily, contains a lot of what is called omega-6 fat, which some research considers pro-inflammatory. But we haven't met anyone standing in the middle of Broadway that grabs their heart and says, oh, the corn oil just finally got me. It's not that overt, but I feel nutritionally more confident using olive oil and canola oil, and occasionally butter because it's got good flavor, when I prepare foods for my home and my family.
Okay. Do you have any?
Do you ever expect me to give you a short answer? Huh?
No, I love your thorough answers.
Thank you.
So, okay.
My family's tired of it. They say, don't ask, Mom.
You're right.
That was your first mistake.
Okay, just real quick, do you have to name the resources of the history of the food trade, of food or trade, the food trade, yeah.
So tell me define what you mean by food trade.
Bonnie? Just
Food
history of-
/ trade. So I just want to understand, like, tea traveled from here to there, and this is what happened, and that sort of thing.
There are a couple of history books about food and global history that are fascinating. I mean, they're
Food and
bedside
global
reading.
history. That's
Yeah, there's a few. I will happily put a modest bibliography out there for Barbara. I also need to know if Barbara Rothstein, whose face is not showing, is my good buddy. How many Barbara Rothsteins could there be? And she's just a complete charming doll, and I want to know if that's really her. Don't reveal if you don't want to. Text me.
So, all right, well, I think that's everything. So I thank everybody for coming. I have in the chat in this is, oops, wrong thing. I got to hit the right buttons. Chat, if anybody would like, who has not signed up for our Kickstarter, I just put in the chat the link so that, you know, you can sign up. If you already have, you'll just get the notices, and you can just show up whenever we happen to have an event, which are frequent. And I thank you, and I will see you. We will see everyone soon. So we have something next week with Petronella, and that would be great. All right. So thank you, Maudene.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.